Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Path to Chartership, Being a Chartered Environmentalist. This is the third webinar in our Path to Chartership series with SocEnv. Today we will be hearing from Chartered Environmentalists about how and why they became chartered, what it means for them professionally, and ideas on maintaining your registration. While the topics covered will be similar from each of the speakers and there might be a little bit of overlap, they'll be speaking from their own perspective, so hopefully you'll gain something slightly different from each of them. My name is Lisa Poole and I'm your host for today. I'm joined by a number of fantastic speakers which I'd like to introduce to you now. So first of all, we have Paul. Paul is Technical Director with ITP Energized and has over 20 years experience as an environmental consultant, advising clients in a range of sectors including residential, commercial property, energy, engineering, local government, as well as ports and harbours. Paul is a Chartered Environmentalist and full member of IEMA and is a member of the IEMA Impact Assessment Steering Group. For a number of years, Paul was part of IEMA's membership assessment panel, helping to assess candidates for full membership and Chartered Environmentalist status. So welcome, Paul. We also have Simon with us today. Simon is Divisional Director within Jacobs, leading their EIA team in Reading. He has 15 years work experience working for the Environment Agency, HS2 Limited and Jacobs with current responsibilities for major road, rail and utility projects. Simon was an associate member of IEMA, joining in 2006 and achieved full member status in 2009, gaining chartership in 2013. Currently also a member of the IEMA IA steering group. So hello, Simon. Alex is Principal Environmental Consultant and EIA Division Lead at Exodus Group. He has 12 years experience in delivering EIA and consent services to major infrastructure projects, predominantly in the offshore wind sector. Alex has been a full member and Chartered Environmentalist since 2013. We're also joined by Dr. Rufus Howard, who is Policy and Engagement Lead at IEMA and a Chartered Environmentalist himself, and Sarah Ridgen, who is Policy and Communications Officer at Society for the Environment, or SocEnv. So it's great to have you all with us today. Before we get started, I'd just like to remind you that the webinar is being recorded and you will be able to watch again on IEMA.net if you're an IEMA member or on the SocEnv website later on. Throughout the presentation, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A at the end, so please do send through any questions that you have for the speakers. Do that throughout the presentations and we'll come to those at the end. So I'll now switch over to Rufus, who's going to give the first perspective on being CEnv. Rufus, welcome today. Thank you again for doing this. Hopefully you'll see a notification to switch to your screen.
Okay,
Fabulous.
Lisa, can you see that? Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So today I'm going to give a brief overview from my own perspective on professional chartership, what Chartered Environmentalist means to me, how I maintain it, my journey, and how I use CEnv, and sort of a whirlwind tour in sort of 10 minutes. So I want to start just by saying a little bit about the terminology. We use this word profession a lot and professional, and often professional is used just to mean a paid occupation, but that's not the way that it should really be used, and it's not the way that we use it in terms of chartership. We're talking about belonging to a profession. What do we mean by profession? Again, often confuse it with just any old paid occupation, but actually what we're talking about when we talk about a profession is one that involves sort of prolonged study and training, formal qualification, and code of conduct. Furthermore, when we talk about professionalism or professional behaviours, we're talking about the competencies and conduct expected of professionals. This comes from historically, where formal professions typically involve those occupations with important social functions that required expert judgment. Those professions were provided sort of autonomy of managing their own institutions, and with that a sort of privileged position in society. But in exchange, there was this social contract where the professions would maintain and improve technical competence and also holding to ethical standards. So in terms of chartership and how that fits into that, for me, chartership is comprised of three main points. There's the professional knowledge and competence, there's the commitment to continuing professional development, and there's this aspect of ethical conduct by by adhering to a code of ethics. And it's these three components which differentiate it from simply a paid occupation. In terms of the code of conduct for the Chartered Environmentalists, I'm not going to read all of that out, but I really wanted to pull out a point that the third bullet there is talking about serving the needs of the environment and society. So this goes well beyond just being paid for a transaction or a service. It's about serving as an example and upholding the integrity and competence of the profession. So this is very value and ethical based, and this goes beyond simply paid work. What does CEnv mean to me personally? Well, this is the description from the Society of the Environment. I've highlighted the aspects which speak out to me. It's for professionals. It's a high level of skill and experience. It's not any level of skill or an experience in a profession. It does enhance your career prospects through establishing your proven experience, and importantly, the aspect of commitment to professional standards. So how do I maintain my CPD? Through a whole range of activities. I volunteer in an unpaid capacity on several boards, institutes and organisations where I learn from other peers and colleagues on those boards and also provide input. Speak at universities, conferences, webinars, etc. And it's not just the speaking. In preparing to speak, you have to do research. You have to make sure that you're up to date, and that helps you maintain your competencies. I also write, and similarly to the speaking, in order to write, I need to read a lot to make sure that what I'm writing about is correct, reading blogs, articles, journals, guidance, policy, books, etc. Then finally, obviously within projects themselves, I'm working on policy, sustainability consulting, EIA projects, etc. And in all of these, I'm learning new skills in new sectors, applying new techniques, and honing my skills and competencies on the job, so to speak. So through all of those activities, I managed to keep myself up to date in my professional practice, whilst following the code of conduct, as mentioned earlier. How did I get to CEnv? What did I do? And some thoughts on that. So I did an undergrad biodiversity degree, a master's in environmental law, started work with AMEC, at the time 45,000 staff, international engineering firm. Whilst I was at AMEC, I joined IEMA, started my journey with the Professional Institute with the associate exam, and then after a few years, registered auditor and registered EIA practitioner. Then moved to the Environment Agency, where I undertook further CPD around project management training, stakeholder engagement training, and around the time I moved from the Environment Agency to Royal Haskoning DHV, I achieved full membership with IEMA. I stayed at Royal Haskoning DHV for around 12 years, starting as a, that was my 2-year-old, starting as a senior consultant and then ending up as Director of Renewables and Director of Sustainable Development. During that time, I used to write for Environmentalist and Transform magazine, speaking at international conferences at IAIA and doing leadership training with TIAS. Around this time, I applied and achieved my chartership with Society for the Environment and IEMA. I carried on volunteering for Kent Kitchen Partnership, which I still advise on, and started work with the Crown Estate on the Industry Evidence Programme, and then was hired to support the World Bank with the development of their certification and accreditation program for their 500 environmental and social staff. It was around that time that I applied for and gained my fellowship of IEMA. Then did a PhD at Kent on environmental values and started work with Aries Doctoral Training Partnership, setting up my own sustainability consultancy in 2019, taking on the role of impact assessment policy lead at IEMA and advising the International Finance Corporation on environmental and social governance. Now, if I look back across that, what I came across was certain professional tribes, for want of a better word. The academics, they have their own way of categorizing progress, which is based on research output, journal publishing, grant applications, etc. And they go through their own various ranks within academia. Similarly, within AMEC, the Environment Agency and Royal Haskoning DHV, they were mainly led by engineers, whether that was oil and gas at AMEC, flood risk engineers, Environment Agency, or maritime engineers within Royal Haskoning DHV, these were organisations that were mainly focused on those professions. And some of the other organisations, such as IEMA, IIA, Greenfriars, Ken Nature Partnership, are predominantly staffed by environmental professionals. And what I wanted to pull out here is that I've just added on another little circle onto the Environment Agency, AMEC, Royal Haskoning, IFC, World Bank, whereby there are environmental divisions and environmental professionals working with organisations that are not themselves environmental organisations per se. And that's where you run into some of the difficulties, but also the opportunities for chartership. So, for example, just using a quick case study, in Royal Haskoning, when you achieve chartership as an engineer, you would receive a pay rise, but the same was not offered to the environmentalists achieving chartership. So I challenged this, and we had a meeting with the chiefs from the civils engineers, the mechanical and electrical and buildings, etc. And they explained that they didn't feel it was the same level of competence, or there was not comparable between a chartered engineer and an environmentalist. So we sat down and went through what it took to become a chartered engineer, and then we compared that to what it took to become a chartered environmentalist. And at the end of that discussion, they realized it was indeed the same, and they said as much. And so from that point forward, the chartered environmentalist was added to the recognized schemes, and parity was achieved. So that's just a quick example of why it is important as a relatively new profession compared to some of the more historic professions that we maintain our professional standards and adopt things such as chartership. So final slide. So I use my Chartered Environmentalist. I use it on my CV and my social media profiles. I recommend it to other professionals. I see it in specification for jobs. I also put it in specification for jobs when I'm in that role. I see it as specification for promotion criteria within promotion structures. I also use it as part of my demonstration of competent expert. It's not sufficient on its own, but in addition to my principal EIA practitioner status, it's part of my evidence base. And finally, I also use it as part of a certification model, because many other emerging professions are looking at certification, and Chartered Environmentalists and the system of chartership is a good exemplar of that method. I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much, Lisa.
Fab, thank you, Rufus. It's interesting to see your journey. I'm just going to switch over to Paul now. So Paul, if you're ready to accept the request and to share your presentation. Fabulous. So I think you're still, there we go. Paul, you're with us. Can we hear you?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Rufus. Thanks, Lisa. So this is really a personal explanation of why I chose to go down the route of chartership. I started off my career working in a civils and engineering company, civils and structural, and like Rufus mentioned there, I could see that everyone else around me had a path, they had a way forward to progress their career. They had this chartership through the Institute of Civil Engineers, and I wanted to do the same because I felt that it gave me a target to aim for. At that point, it was obviously way ahead in the future, but it felt like it was the right thing. And I also recognised that when you spoke to someone who was a chartered engineer, they had a level of competency, a level of knowledge that had been gained through experience. I wanted the same for us environmentalists or people working in sustainability. And I also could see that that meant that you were connected into a peer-to-peer network, that you were recognised as someone that had achieved this level of competency. So that was really what drove me to move towards chartership, and it made it clear in my mind that there was opportunities for me to learn and for me to develop, and to be able to absolutely say to other more historical sectors such as engineering or accountants even, or lawyers, I'm chartered. I've gone through this process. I definitely do agree, as Rufus has said there, that it increases your employment opportunities and also helps give you the opportunity to do good work, whether that's working towards net zero now or in the past working towards sustainability broadly, or whether it's delivering environmental impact assessment for renewables. And again, another point is, it's recognised now. I think it's become established. It's Chartered Environmentalist has been around for a long time, not as long as obviously engineering, etc., but it's now established and recognised. So, in terms of maintaining membership, and in the context of having been on the other side of having assessed people for full membership of IEMA and for Chartered Environmentalists as a dual application, I was able to see what people needed to bring to qualify for Chartership. And one thing in particular was to have a broad understanding of sustainability issues, not just to be focused on one specific thing, which is fine if it's a very technical specialist subject, but a Chartered Environmentalist is someone who can openly discuss issues around climate change or environmental social governance, or be comfortable discussing flooding. So it was someone who had a broad knowledge, and when we were on the panel, we used to say that person, you would be comfortable introducing them as a Chartered Environmentalist because you knew they could engage quite broadly on the subject matter. And so in maintaining it, what I've tried to do is push myself to be working on projects that challenged me, that in every instance I was learning and adapting. I think that's absolutely key. But I think Rufus touched on this as well, but reading you can't be understated. It's really important that you're reading broadly, and not just the obvious environmental or sustainability topics, but actually leadership, topics of diversity, looking at autobiographies of leaders and how have they got to that position of leadership. I'm currently reading Barack Obama's autobiography, volume 1, 600 pages. It's a lot to get through, but it's really fascinating how he got to where he did. Again, attending events and conferences, joining IEMA webinars and other institutes. And again, from a personal point of view, I was really keen to get involved in the steering group so that I could engage with peers and make a contribution to what IEMA is doing on impact assessment. And other things I've done is, listening to books on Audible. If you can't sit down and read, you can be walking the dog, or particularly when driving, you can be listening to books on leadership, environmental topics, etc. And lastly, just to close this last slide, I think TED Talks is a wonderful resource. We're blessed with amazing technology that we all perhaps take for granted now, but you can access presentations delivered by people all over the world, experts putting across their opinion on subject matters, and there's a wealth of information in TED Talks that can be gleaned. A lot of it is good on sustainability as well. And I'll finish there and hand back to Lisa.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you. I think I agree with TED Talks. Definitely spend a lot of time looking at those. So we'll just switch over to Simon now. I'm going to give you control. Just a quick reminder, if you do have any questions for the speakers, please do send those in as they're presenting, because that will allow me to ask those at the end of the presentations. Fabs. Simon.
Okay, can you see my screen okay?
Yep, it looks fine.
Great, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Simon White from Jacobs. So I think I took a slightly different slant on the question that we were set for today's session, and I split the reasons for becoming chartered into reasons that I had, but also reasons that employers have for encouraging their staff to become chartered, and Rufus has already touched on some dimensions to that. So when I sat down to reflect on why I became chartered and why it's important to me to be chartered, I think again, Rufus touched on the ethical side of things and the code of conduct. And for me, it is about the ethos and the values. When I get to put CEnv on my Chartered Environmentalist on my signature or on my CV, to me it does say I'm an advocate for the environment, and that side of it is important. And implied into that, again, as Paul and Rufus have said, is that gives me credibility as an expert in my field, and that was an important part of why I personally became chartered. It was the importance of having that credibility in my field, and it gave me professional recognition. It also demonstrated my personal progression and career development. And I, as Lisa said at the beginning, I sort of started out at associate level right at the beginning of my career, and gradually went through obtaining full membership and now chartership. And I'm currently in the process of producing my application for that career development, that progression. And there's an element of challenge that comes with it as well, in terms of the process of becoming chartered is not easy or straightforward, and nor should it be, given the status that comes with achieving that. And I remember at the end of the process, I came out of the interview, as it was at that time, and it effectively felt an enormous sense of sort of having demonstrated that, yes, I'm good enough to be recognised in my field with that status. And that sort of encompasses my personal feelings and position on chartership. In terms of how my employer or Jacobs now view chartership, Rufus has already touched on that potentially in some organisations there's a monetary benefit to getting chartered, and certainly there are certain organisations where chartership is needed for certain roles. For Jacobs, there's quite often effectively framework rates that are set under the contracts that we work under, and chartership will be one of the criteria that that is considered in terms of whether you qualify for those certain rates. And so there's an increased value that comes to the employer. It's an easy way to demonstrate the competence of the staff members, and it's a way that Jacobs can also demonstrate their support to their employees by providing time, by providing training, and effectively that is a way to improve employee satisfaction. It's not always just about the salaries, it's about what else an organisation can do for an individual, and that progression towards chartership and networks that enable chartership are an important way for the employer to demonstrate their buy-in to their staff and the support that they provide. Oh, sorry, excuse me. There we go. In terms of how I maintain my chartership, a lot of commonality with those that have spoken before. You know, lots of sources of information. It's really about absorbing as much as you can. Again, I would endorse what Paul said about the breadth of subject matter. There's quite a lot of blogs that can be followed. I follow some of the legal ones on Bertram, Dyson, Bell, is what the BDB is there, in terms of case law decisions that are made around environmental regulations and the like. You've got IEMA webinars and internal training sessions run by Jacobs. In terms of networks, I think Rufus touched on the importance of sort of learning from the people that you're working with. It's also the case that with social media, that effectively there is a lot more information readily available. So LinkedIn, for example, I follow HS2 Limited on LinkedIn. They have some fantastic pieces around the work that is being done. If you want to see a tunnel boring machine being brought to site, you can now get a full video on HS2 showing that being brought to site, whereas those kind of resources weren't available even 10 years ago. And just in terms of maintaining my knowledge about how projects are delivered, what the benchmark is for what a good project is, social media is now a really good way to sort of keep on top of that. And then record keeping in terms of that audit trail of being able to demonstrate to IEMA and the Society of the Environment what I've been doing in order to stay up to date. Thanks, Lisa.
Fabulous, thank you for that. And then on to our final speaker. So I'm just going to switch to Alex. Hopefully you'll have the notification now.
Yep, hopefully that's working all okay.
Yep, that looks great, Alex, go for it.
Great, thank you, Lisa, and thank you to the other speakers. I would echo and agree with much of what has gone before, so I will try my best not to repeat and focus on some of my personal observations. So yeah, the things I'd like to just briefly cover before we get into Q&A is my journey to CEnv, why I encourage my team to progress to chartership as well, a little bit on my activities in maintaining chartership, and also I guess just some kind of reflections on the challenges of applying and maybe the perceived challenges of applying and perceived challenges of maintaining charterships, and some hopefully some suggestions to help people overcome those. So yeah, very briefly, I did a geography degree at Durham, and then moved on to a master's at the University of Manchester, and then my 12-year working career has progressed from coastal defence projects, pipelines that you can see, through to kind of my last 8 or 9 years, specifically in the offshore wind and electrical infrastructure projects. I've been fortunate enough that the companies that I've worked for over those years, being part of a professional institution like IEMA, has always been an in parallel process to that. So I was a graduate member immediately after university, progressing to associate, and then full member. So my company objectives always closely aligned with professional membership progression, and that's something I'll pick up on later as being I guess really important to the success of becoming chartered. So why do I encourage my team to progress to chartership? Well, it's been touched upon already. The recognition, the expertise, and the knowledge required is significant, and is all contributing towards me wanting to build the best team for our clients. It demonstrates competent experts, particularly. I don't think we've actually specifically mentioned the EIA regs on this call yet, but there is now the requirement for the competent experts to be stated and named in EIA. So the chartership is a big part of that recognition. I guess on a more personal level, I really believe that it shows accountability for your own professional development, learning and training. I think an individual or a team member who wants to progress their membership and progress their chartership is really showing the accountability and the attributes and the desire for professional development that makes them a really valuable member of the team. I've also added here, and Rufus touched upon this really well in point that he made, that it's that interface with engineering colleagues. The companies that I work for, and particularly at Exodus now, we're a engineering and environment consultancy, you know, a lot of our projects are a holistic delivery of both of those disciplines together, and the chartership qualifications speaks to engineering colleagues. They recognise what it means, what it's required to get there. So it's a commonality in our interaction with engineering colleagues, and I think it's a fantastic way to make sure you're actively engaged with the IEMA network, both as you progress to chartership and also as you maintain it through, as people have said before, webinars, training, writing articles, reading material produced by IEMA. So yeah, being chartered really drives your active engagement with the network. A lot of this is covered already, so I'll skip through some of how I maintain it, but I guess I would just pick up specifically on the need to keep a record of your CPD and keep a record of how you maintain your chartership, because you can be asked to provide your CPD record as a mandatory requirement for certainly for at least for the chartership grade. So yeah, I've just noted a few bullet points there of things that contribute to mine. You know, formal and informal training, IEMA webinars, internal company training courses, whether that's on a specific discipline, whether it's project management, time management, stakeholder engagement. You know, again, I've been very fortunate enough to work for companies that have excellent internal training courses that contribute to CPD. Coaching and mentoring, I think maybe it hasn't quite been picked up. You know, both being a coach and a mentor, and also receiving coaching and mentoring is a really good way of continuing CPD. And I've labelled it as on-the-job training there, but you know, I think someone mentioned earlier, challenging yourself in the projects that you work on, the reports that you contribute to, is all excellent kind of training and professional development that can contribute to maintaining your chartership. And I just noted their recommendation of 30 hours. That's lifted from IEMA's CPD policy, and in the bottom corner there I just dropped in a couple of links to IEMA's CPD FAQs, which I found particularly useful, and also CPD policy. So do go and have a look at that if you have any questions. One really important thing, as I mentioned earlier, I find is around setting CPD goals and objectives at the start of the year, and that is particularly important, I find, in linking these to your own, I guess, internal company goals. And what I mean by that is I think many of us will have our own internal company development processes where we set goals and objectives in our workplace. But actually, it's a really good opportunity is to link those two things together. So if you're upgrading your membership, you know, review the core competencies of that next level up and see if you can align that to you know, internal goals that you're setting yourself in the workplace. And also thinking about the roles and responsibilities that you will have in your work, in your career. What training do you need, and actually could that also then form part of your CPD goals and form part of the IEMA webinars, events and training courses that you look to attend to support both your professional membership growth and your career growth within your company. I think it's the message for me is really about seeing those two things running in parallel, and not necessarily it's focusing on one or the other, or them being duplication of effort. It's about really having those two things intertwined and running in parallel. So just finally touching upon some of the challenges, my personal reflections. I think a common one that I certainly found, and I hear from my team members, is creating the time to apply. We're all very busy with project work, proposal work. How do you find that time to progress your application? Well, I think my advice there would be talk to your employer, talk to your manager. As many of us on this call have said, companies want to support your individual growth and development, because it has it achieves company targets and has company benefits as well. So I would encourage people to talk to their team and their managers and try to carve out time in your week that is specifically, or over a month or two period, that is specifically time that you can allocate to delivering your application, because you will see the benefits from doing that. The case study examples, I just wanted to make a note on. You know, some people have, I guess, nervousness around the content of those in their application. I think, you know, my advice on that specifically would be to make sure that you focus on you and your role in work, or your role on a project. That's what the you know, the assessors want to hear about. They want to hear about your contribution to projects, your contribution to volunteering work that you might do outside the workplace. So it can be hard to write about ourselves sometimes, but I would really encourage that mentality when you're preparing your application, and get a mentor or a support to help you with your application. I'm sure many of the companies that we work for would provide a chartered person to help with that, or indeed reach out to IEMA, and I'm sure there's, you know, the network is there to provide support to people wishing to put in their application. And then hopefully a lot of what we've said today about CPD and maintaining the chartership has maybe dispelled some myths or concerns that it's onerous or too challenging. You know, actually more of what we all enjoy doing, reading, listening, attending conferences, challenging ourselves, counts to CPD than you might imagine. It's just about keeping a good record of that. And as I mentioned earlier, the more you can align your company career goals and work objectives with your CPD objectives, then it's going to streamline that process and allow you to keep just one record and have a aligned set of objectives. So yeah, hopefully that was useful, and now I'll hand back to Lisa.
Fabulous, thank you. I'm just going to switch back to my screen. Can't do that and speak at the same time, you see, it's difficult. Right, fabulous. So now we've got quite a good amount of time for questions and answers, which is good because you've all been sending your questions in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start, I've tried to group them a little bit because a few of them are similar. And there seems to be quite a few people who are here maybe at the start of their career. So I think it'd be good to start answering some of those and trying to speak through some advice to those people. So just the first question here is, what advice would you give to someone at the beginning of their career? So for example, in the first year of a scheme, and that's come in from Rebecca, and kind of alongside that, graduates from Helena, what degrees can lead to becoming chartered? There's some questions around whether you have to do specific degrees or whether you think it's open to all backgrounds. So does anyone want to kind of start answering some of those first? I think you're all muted, so
I'm happy to
any
start.
advice to fabulous. Yes,
Sure. So
let's go for it.
So Chartered Environmentalist isn't limited to IEMA. There are dozens of organizations for specific environmental careers, such as forestry and CEnv and CEnv, and there's loads if you go on the Society for Environment. So there's a very large range of environmental related degrees which have pathways. IEMA is obviously what we've been talking about today, where we're the home of sort of sustainability professionals, registered environmental auditors, impact assessment practitioners, environmental managers, but there are loads of other environmental related institutes that have pathways to chartered environmentalists. So that's the kind of one of those questions, Lisa. And in terms of advice to graduates starting out, I wouldn't focus on chartership at the beginning, because chartership's going to come later. I think you need to find some intermediate goals. So as both Simon and myself said, we went for associate. I think I'm not sure if that still exists the way we did it, the associate exam. I think it's like practitioner maybe now at IEMA. But there are interim goals that you should be aiming for on your way to chartership.
Great, thanks, Rufus. Yeah, I think what it changed, didn't it? So we've got the practitioner and we have associate levels now. So yeah, there are stepping stones, and I think the registered environmental practitioner is another way to do that as well. So Rufus, just to follow on from that, actually, we had a question from Kat who asked about your Masters in Environmental Law. She's studying the same thing. Did you find it difficult to get into the field? Because it seems that a lot of environmental consultancy firms are favouring those with engineering degrees.
I think what's needed changes over time, and environmental graduate positions in consultancies are very competitive because of the number of people graduating compared to the number of spaces. And often they are looking for specialists. So you'll see an advert specifically for a graduate marine consultant, or a GIS consultant, or a geotechnical consultant, or an air quality consultant. So having specialisms isn't necessarily a downside. It will make it will narrow the field of jobs that you might be specifically qualified for, but it would increase your chances of getting those jobs that you were specifically qualified for. Whereas if you had a very general degree like environmental science or geography, obviously you could apply to any environment related consultancy job, but if that job is asking for a specific subspecialism like GIS or ecology or what have you, then you might not be as qualified as another graduate. And often what we see is people following a general environmental degree with a specialized master's to give them the sort of best of both worlds.
Great, thank you. Let me see what we've got here. I've honestly got quite a few questions coming in. Let's answer this one for Ian, because I think the rest of the panelists will be able to give some advice on this one. Ian said he's 47 and spent most of his career in the international development sector in programme management roles. He's in the process of transitioning to a career in sustainability environment sector and partway through the foundation certificate with IEMA. He reads and watches as much as he can and is involved in various local environmental action groups. But what advice would the panel give to someone like Ian, who is changing his career to join? I mean, is Chartered Environmentalist the way for him to go? How could he go about that, given he has experience in different industries? I'm going to see if anyone... Paul or Alex, do you have a view on that? Any advice to give to Ian?
Yeah, just pondering a response to that. It's a very interesting, quite exciting situation to hear about. That change. I guess I would probably echo, potentially easy answer, echo what Rufus mentioned earlier, and consider the step process to chartership. There are levels of membership that can take you on that kind of step journey up to chartership, and it might be that one of those is the immediate solution, and then getting that recognition can then set you off on the stepping stones to the chartership. I think it's also worth reflecting that from a chartership point of view, it does cover a range of experience, background, areas of work. Not everyone has to be a environmental consultant or match a profile of one of us on this call to achieve it. The chartership is designed to capture a diverse level of background, but that specialist knowledge is the key element. So I would say what the person who wrote the question seems to be doing at the moment is exactly right. I would have a look at a level of membership just before chartership to see if there's a stepping stone. And Lisa or Sarah, maybe this is something you could advise on. Perhaps there's an opportunity to contact IEMA directly to kind of review the competencies and get that as I mentioned about getting a mentor or some support on your application, having that more specific deep dive into the objectives or the requirements of chartership to see where some specific action could be taken to improve the application form.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Sorry, I realised I put you on the spot with that one there, but I think to echo what you've just said, absolutely. If you're going through the foundation certificate, you'll be coming out with an associate level membership for IEMA. So I think, as Alex has just mentioned, reviewing what the competencies are for practitioner will be your best bet, and then looking at where the gaps are to see where you could do your CPD and where you could focus the different bits on what you learn. Brilliant. So a couple here, we've had quite a few actually about managing time. So I know a few of you touched on it and how you manage time with CPD and manage time for the application. A couple of people have said that they struggle to find time to maintain or commit as much time to CPD as they would like. So how do you kind of strike the right balance? And then also, how do you manage your time going through the application process and then kind of maintaining CPD alongside working? Does anyone have any tips there for the two people that have asked questions on that one? I mean, we haven't heard from Simon or Paul. I don't know if you have any tips on time management.
Lisa, it's Simon here. I mean, I think that one of the best ways to do it is what Alex has already said, in terms of if you can align your annual objective objectives with things that you've got to achieve for moving towards chartership. I think that's a really good way of making it not an extra that needs to be fitted in. I think that I mean, it's no coincidence that IEMA, for example, schedule a lot of their webinars and things at lunch times. I think certainly we do that with our internal training sessions as well. And I know that that when I was working towards my chartership, looking at trying to be quite disciplined about when I was going to spend time working on the chartership application and when I was going to be doing other things. So for me personally at that time, I know a bit less relevant in the current climate, but I was generally traveling about an hour each way to work at that point, and effectively I just said, okay, a couple of those days I'm not going to do work related activity. I will effectively dedicate some of that time to trying to work towards my applications. I mean, and that said, when you get down to the crux of it, there is an element of you need to find some time outside of work to fulfill that to fulfill that professional development, and it is a question of priorities and whatever else is going on. Certainly, I think that it is a question about trying to find a time that works for you, and I know a lot of people that have worked in my team have almost said, right, okay, I'm going to prioritize doing my application in an 8-week window, and giving yourself a very strict time scale to try and produce the documentation that's required. But by agreeing internal dates for internal review by colleagues of application forms and the like, just to kind of hold yourself to account on working through that process. I would also just throw in that one of the most useful exercises is effectively to talk to somebody that's just been through the chartership process. The criteria and the experiences are always slightly changing, and certainly at Jacobs there's a chartership network where effectively people that are in the process of working towards their chartership can get in contact with and have talks from people that have just gone through the chartership process, just to get that first-hand raw experience of somebody that's just been through it and the lessons learned from them. And again, in terms of saving time, perhaps rather than time management, you know, trying to find ways that you don't produce loads and loads of work that then you don't ultimately end up including in your application. Talking through somebody that's just been through the experience before you even sort of really put pen to paper on some of those things can be a useful way to try and cut down that risk.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Simon. I think you've covered a lot there, and I would suggest that, you know, when you make that commitment, it's a bit like committing to get fitter. When you agree that with someone else, you get support from your company, that you block out time, you do it in batches through your calendar, and you colour code it, and you set it aside at a time when you really think you'll be able to work on your application. And I think if you do that and you hold yourself accountable to it, then it's certainly achievable.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Simon. I'm going to ask a question here, and just going to find it again. There's obviously a lot of people who have different accreditations for the different specialisms that they're working in, and there's one here from Patrick, and they said working exclusively in the marine environment as an independent consultant and having Chartered Marine Scientist accreditation, is there a benefit to acquiring Chartered Environmentalist alongside these other accreditations? I mean, if you kind of want to take that question wider, why would you, or why would someone go for Chartered Environmentalist when they might say have Chartered Engineering or others? If I'm gonna go to each of the speakers in turn on that one, just to get their views on why Chartered Environmentalists and how they're different between the others. But just before we do, we've had a lot of questions coming in about the process of applying for Chartered Environmentalists and the different steps that are required, including interviews, how to prepare for those. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the recording for the first webinar from this series into the chat. And if you have a look at that, you should be able to see the outline of the process. But if you do have any other questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with the membership team. So let's go to Rufus first. So Rufus, what would you say is the difference between Chartered Environmentalists and acquiring other accreditations, and probably why would people go for Chartered Environmentalists?
Well, I think that in the case of the questioner around if they're a chartered marine scientist, I would say if they're going to stay within a purely marine role, then that will probably be adequate. But if they want to expand their career into more broader and non-marine environment and sustainability issues, then Chartered Environmentalist is more broader to sustainability than Chartered Marine Scientist, which is quite focused on obviously the marine aspect. I think that this is a personal view, I'm not a massive fan of multiple charterships. I do wonder when you see someone with 3 different charterships, I wonder whether they are, how are they going to maintain all 3 of those? How are they going to maintain cutting edge engineering with cutting edge sustainability with cutting edge project management? And, you know, I'm sure there are some polymaths out there who can do that, but I find that being an expert in just one profession is enough for me. Why would I choose Chartered Environmentalist? It best fits the profession that I'm within. So I think each individual needs to think about what are they an engineer who's getting interested in environment, and if so, do they want to transition into a more of a full-time sustainability role, or do they want to stay doing engineering? Or if they are going to do both, how are they going to maintain those dual sets of competencies?
Thanks, Rufus. Alex or Paul or Simon, did any of you have anything to add to that about why Chartered Environmentalists and the differences between accreditations?
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I would only add, well, not necessarily specific to add, I would just echo agreement with Rufus. You know, I think it is important for the individual to decide what's the best route to chartership for them, and you know, that may well be through a technical specialism chartership. I don't think I agree with Rufus. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I guess my personal reflection for me was that IEMA and Chartered Environmentalist was most applicable to the sector I was working in. It was also most applicable to the aspirations I had for, you know, to work across different sectors and different sectors I wanted to go into, and you know, I'm happy to be disagreed with on this, but at the time, in my opinion, it was the most recognised one as well. That was probably, if I'm being honest, one of the main drivers of taking on the professional membership of Chartership, Chartered Environmentalist.
Thanks, Alex. Simon, did you want to come in on that one as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably it only echoes what the other guys have said in terms of it's fit for purpose in terms of what works for you, and certainly Chartered Environmentalists for me sort of had that quite broad spectrum that covers was important in terms of my day job being having a broad spectrum. I think echoing a bit of what Rufus was saying, I think I've got a sort of, you know, a personal opinion that the sort of this distinction between environment and engineering in particular, hopefully as we move forward with sustainability objectives and the like, that those two things become closer to one another. And I can see, you know, notwithstanding what Rufus was saying about how do you maintain dual or triple hats, as it were, but the benefits of being able to demonstrate a broad environmental knowledge should be more and more important as we move forward, and effectively sustainability should become at the heart of anything that we're designing, anything that we're engineering, and some of perhaps the more traditional distinctions will gradually reduce, and I can see a scenario there where more perhaps traditional engineering chartership, there would be some attraction to having Chartered Environmentalists as well.
Yeah,
Great.
Just I've only really one point left that I can think of to add to this, and I think coming from a former assessor for full membership in Chartership, I would say that, you know, you're looking at people that are really committed to sustainability, really passionate about it. That's the type of person that you want to pass as a Chartered Environmentalist. So I think if you're focused on a technical discipline, say for example like marine science, then the Chartership in marine science is absolutely right for you. So I think it's only people that really want it and willing to work hard to become chartered that should go forward. And if that's not the case, then when it gets to the assessment stage, that will be very noticeable.
Thank you. Thanks to all the speakers on that one. I think we're just about to run out of time. So I'll leave the questions there for now. I just wanted to address a comment that came in from Anna about how women are typically overrepresented in sustainability roles, and is that the case at chartered and full level? And obviously we have all male panel today, and I think in IEMA there is quite an even split between men and women achieving chartership. You're right in that might not be the case across the whole profession. And that is why we launched the Diverse Sustainability Initiative on Friday last week. So that's going to specifically look at women and different groups in the sector and in the profession, and how they reach different levels. Unfortunately, we couldn't get a woman speaker today, but we did have 2 women, an all-women panel on the previous webinar. So we've tried to keep it balanced throughout the series, but not managed to do it due to calendars on some of the dates. But thanks again for your comment, Anna, and it's really important to highlight this, because I think diversity is going to be a really big issue for us to tackle if we do want to make the changes we need to as Chartered Environmentalists. But thank you again to our speakers today. Just a reminder that we do have a webinar next week on the path to chartership. This is the final one in the series, and this will be looking at the global impact, so what it means to have Chartered Environmentalist status in different countries. Sorry if you can hear my dog there. And also, I've already put a link to the first webinar that we had in this series, but you can watch both of those again, as I said, on the IEMA website or the SocEnv website. So just thank you again for joining us today. I hope you found that interesting and useful, and thank you again to all of our speakers. Brilliant. We'll draw that to a close.